Hey there, friend. Welcome to the Having a Mom Moment podcast. I am your host, Shannon Warner. This podcast is all about taking a few moments for yourself and reconnecting to the amazing woman behind the title of mom. You have so many plates spinning at any given time between your kids, your partner, your job, maintaining a household, etc., etc. But where does taking time just for you play into that? Let's spend some time together, you and me, right now. We're rebranding a mom moment to those sacred moments you take to fill your cup first. Let's connect, tune in, and tap into what makes us the incredible women that we are. We'll nurture ourselves first so we can be our best selves for those we pour into on a daily basis. We'll also bask in the beautiful wisdom of other moms to learn about the ways in which they've tapped into alignment in their own motherhood journeys. Come on, mama, it's your time. We're having a mom moment. Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Having a Mom Moment podcast. I am your host, Shannon Warner, and I am so honored that you have taken your precious time to join us here today. I am so excited that this is our first double episode week. I am thrilled to have back my friend Mary, who was pregnant in earlier episodes and is now back to share her postpartum story. It is going to be a two-parter. So today's episode is about her actual labor and delivery experience. So I hope you love it. And if you stumbled across this episode while also expecting yourself, I want you to know that my one-to-one maternity leave mentorship is available. The link to that with all the information is in the show notes. And the Mat Leave Social Maternity Leave Virtual Community is rolling out in January. And if it feels aligned for you, we would love to have you as part of that community to connect and support one another through this huge transition that is motherhood leading into working motherhood. So those details are available via the link in the show notes as well. Without further ado, here's episode 2 this week with my dear friend Mary. I'm so happy to have Mary back. I was thinking about this morning. You know, I've never knew any Marys, and then I moved to North Carolina and I found 2 amazing Marys. So if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, this is Mary, pregnant Mary, and Mary that I had the conversation about SSRIs with. She's back and officially in mamahood. So welcome back. I'm so happy you're here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me back. You know, I love doing these episodes with you, and Claire is with us now, so there might be little squeaky noises until Seth can take over. But but yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that, I mean, it was 2 months ago that we were chatting, or maybe it was like June.
It was a while ago. It was a while ago.
Yeah. It was properly summer at the time, and now it is properly fall. Yeah, it's like we were just talking about. I have my like little bullet points because it's a lot. You know, you come up with lots of information, lots of nuggets, and it's like the longest postpartum is like the longest time ever, but like the shortest time ever. So it all kind of every day kind of like runs into the next in a good way, but sometimes, you know, in a hard way. And I would say I prepared like so much when I was pregnant, and like prepared for labor and birth, and I did all of those things. And I kind of didn't like, I prepared generally for post baby, you know, like when she was actually here, but I didn't like a tangible ways, like stuff and clothes and, you know, all the gadgets we'd need. But I definitely did not prepare for the actuality of like what it takes, which is different for every single parent, obviously. So it's like we were saying, how can you possibly prepare for that portion? So I'm so grateful that I prepared for everything up until, and I had a lot of things in place. I had all the right gear. Like I really did a ton of research, and that was so helpful. Like the snoo is like insane. My sister was like telling me about renting the snoo, and I said, oh, we don't need that. Let me tell you right now how amazing it's been. We started her from day one when we got home, and it's made a huge difference. But yeah, I think I'll just kind of touch on like labor and birth and the story there, but then kind of what I've gathered afterwards. And I'm sure there's a lot of helpful information in there, considering it's so fresh. So I
fresh.
all the details.
Yeah, I'm so ready for this. Mary has been withholding morsels from me. We've been talking throughout, Claire's life, now that she's here, but you're like, just wait, I'll save all the bits. So you're going to get some of my reactions to her labor and delivery story real time. And before we start, from what I do know, I give you so much credit because, and maybe this might be a opportunity for a trigger warning, because from what you've told me, I think a lot of people would classify this as a traumatic birth experience, but you're not walking away from your experience calling it traumatic, because I think I'm projecting onto you. But from what I
No,
know about
no,
you, I
no.
think you went into it with like such a good mindset and like just being in the experience and like riding the wave and everything. And I think because you had such an open mind about the experience, you were able to absorb what happened in a way that didn't feel traumatic. So let's get into it.
That's exactly right. Like I definitely could have construed it as quote unquote traumatic. And I think for some women it might have been, if maybe there was, that's why I think preparation is so important. I think you really should know all the terms the doctors and nurses are using. You should know what's going on, like when they, because they do tell you this is what's happening at every step of the way, which is really helpful. But if you're not prepared and you don't know what those terms mean, it could be very like it could be very scary.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if your spouse or whomever is there with you is not like super solid or doesn't really understand, preparation is key. You can never be too prepared, and that doesn't mean you can't be flexible, because you should always be flexible, but you should
Mm-hmm.
definitely prepare. And people, when some people are like, I'm just gonna wing it with birth,
Mm.
I don't think that's the time to wing it. I think you really need to know what your body's doing. It's going to make you feel so much more comfortable in each stage. So yeah, so we were at over 40 weeks, and I was so enormous, like so swollen. I honestly had a great pregnancy until the very end. It was really hard to even like walk. It's very painful,
Mm-hmm.
really swollen, really huge. So I really wanted to just go into spontaneous labor. I didn't want to be induced. But she was getting to a point where it was like over 40 weeks. She was pushing 41 weeks. So we did set an induction date because our hospital was just so full, like just couldn't, they couldn't guarantee. Of course, if I was in active labor, they would, fit me
Yeah.
in, but they couldn't really guarantee that they could tend to me like right away. If there was just so many, there was 250 babies born the month of July by the time we got there on July 22nd. It was
That's
insane.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
we got there, we had a 6 p.m. scheduled induction, got there at like 5:15 because I'm like an overachiever with that type of thing. But it's funny because any other appointment, I'd be like 5 minutes late. But that one, I was like, I'm here.
We're here. Let's do this.
Snacks. Yeah. Like I'm not leaving until this baby comes out. Um, so we go in the waiting room. There's not a room ready. 6 hours later, we're still in that waiting room, and we're keeping pretty good spirits. Like we're like, all right, and they're like, do you want to come home? Do you want to go home? And we'll call you in. And I said, no, I'm not leaving. I'm gonna just stay in this room.
I
So
remember your Instagram story with your snacks, and I
yeah,
was like, oh my God, they're going to burn through all the snacks before they get a room.
exactly. It was like ridiculous. I just assumed in my mind's eye we'd be in the room, we'd be having snacks, whatever. Um, But on the other hand, I always was like a little nervous about when it would be time to go to the hospital. Like when would you know? And
Mm-hmm.
I know you can time your contractions and everything. And so I was a little nervous about that. So I was happy to be at the hospital. What I didn't expect to happen is I went into labor uh, in the waiting room, like started, having contractions. And at first Seth was like, oh, I don't know, maybe there, yeah. So I did that timer, the timer app, and it was saying at a certain point, it was saying it's time to go to the hospital, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to the like head nurse here or whatever. Like, hey, pretty sure I'm having contractions. Like now, can we get what's the update on our room? And they're like, we're so sorry, but there's just not enough nurse staffing available. There was plenty of rooms, not enough nurse staffing, and I'm like sitting they like brought me the amazing, midwife who was there for half of labor. She was so awesome, and she like brought me a birthing ball and, you know, all this stuff. But so I was kind of like sitting on it and kind of just moving around, but they were starting to get fairly intense. Not like if you've had a baby before, not like the intensity that it becomes, but it was just the very beginning stages.
So what hour was this into your wait when this started?
This was 6 hours in.
6 hours in, you started having these contractions.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So okay. I ended up not having to get induced at all.
Yeah.
They brought me into like an outpatient room, and they were able to check dilation. They were like, yep, you're 3 to 4 centimeters, which I was like, yeah, that checks out. That checks out. Because I'd been sitting at 1 for like weeks, 1 centimeter. And so I was in natural labor. I didn't have to get induced. So I was excited about that. We just kept having contractions. We would walk around the hospital, do the classic, like, I need to wait, you know, go through contraction, then we can keep walking. You know, you can obviously still, they say when you can still like talk through your contractions, it's not very intense. So that's the stage we're at. Around 4 a.m., we finally get into a room, and it's, I kept begging for this.
Oh my gosh.
Room, Water World. I kept calling it the wrong name. Water World. I would call it Waterworks, and they were like, I think it's Water World, I think. I don't know. And it had this huge like hot tub, and it was newly renovated, beautiful. So around 4 a.m., I'm like probably 5 centimeters or 6 centimeters, something like that. We get in the tub, and the water was so helpful for contractions. But I did, after a little bit after, our midwife said, you know, it could slow down contractions. But, you know, I think I was okay being at the first birth. I think I was okay that things were kind of slowed down just a touch, because as you know, because I know with Everly, it was really intense.
Yeah.
I didn't really want like the intensity so fast. I kind of wanted to build something you've
like
never
to ease into it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, even now, if somebody asks me, what does a contraction feel like? I don't even know if I can properly explain it. It's like the most bizarre, it's like a wave, you know, it's gaining intensity, it peaks, and then it slows down. But it's like the physical aspect that it does to your body is like, I can't even explain it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. It like stops you in your tracks, obviously, takes your breath away, like all the things. And then you're like, oh, I'm okay for a few.
Yes. Then you're like, this is fine. Yeah. It's so bizarre. It's very cool. But yeah, it's very bizarre. It's literally your uterus contracting and pushing the baby down and out. And it's like, if you don't know that's what your body's doing, it feels like, oh my God, my like body's getting ripped apart. But it's productive pain, you know, it's productive contraction. So yeah, we labor in water, we go in and out for a long time, like a long time. So around 7 8 a.m., the sun starts coming up. I see outside, we haven't slept obviously a wink, you know, we're both, and Seth's like right there with me, and it's intense. And yeah, and so the sun comes up, and I'm like, so my midwife, it's her shift change, she's heading out, but she was so amazing. She sat with me like an extra hour, and I was like, don't you need to go home? She's like, it's okay. And then the doctor came in that was taking over, who was great too. And she was really pregnant at the time, the doctor that delivered.
Oh.
So it was really, yeah, it was amazing. I'm like, that is amazing that she was still delivering babies like super pregnant like that. So yeah, at a certain point, I'm like, okay, guys, I think like, they're like, do you want to get checked? And I was like, no, I don't know. I said, I think I'm ready to push. And they're like, well, let's check you first then. Because it was starting to get to the point where I was exhausted. It was so intense that like, it felt like I couldn't do this for much more than like a few hours longer at this intensity. And the nurse, you know, she was honest with me. She said, look, it's going to gain in intensity, and they're going to be closer together. Everything's going to get more intense. And I'm like, you know, that's true. And I'm already kind of like at my edge, I would say, of that. So they do end up checking to see if it's time to push. And they're like, look, you're at like 7 8 centimeters. It's not time. So I said, okay, if that is the case, I was very calm. I was like, if that is the case, then it is time. I believe it's time to get some relief.
Yeah.
Also known as an epidural. And
Yeah.
so, and I, in the birth plan, I was flexible, but I did want to avoid, and I did. I avoided. I naturally labored for 13 hours out of
Yeah.
20 hours, which for me, I did my job. I did what I came there to do. I proved to myself that I could do it. Not that it was ever about that, but it sort of was. I was like, I
It
want
was
to.
enough to check the box for you.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
did. I was like, you know what? That was great and fun. But this is getting to the point where it's not fun anymore. I don't want to get to the point where I'm desperate.
Right. Right.
So I knew, because just because you order an epidural does not mean it's happening immediately.
No. And if you wait too long, you can't get one.
Correct. And so it's like, yeah. So if you really want it, you order that right away, right? But
yeah.
So I knew it'd probably take an hour or 2 hours to come. So I did order one, and Seth was, he knew I really wanted to avoid it. So he really made sure I meant it and I was ready. He's like, you can do it. You can do it. I was like, I know I can do it. But I would also like to rest. Like we haven't since yesterday.
And that's what's hard is you don't know how much longer it's going to last. It's not like, okay, you've done 13 hours, you'll be done in 2 more hours. If you have that information, then maybe you could make a different decision if that felt aligned for you, but you don't know how long it's going to last.
Exactly. Totally. Like it was more so with you and Everly where it was fast and furious. I think I could have pushed through because it's like, oh, the baby's coming. Like that's it.
Yeah.
It's time. You're in transition. That was not the case. I was not in transition. I probably would have had 3 to 4 more hours ish. And I could have done it, but honestly, it would have been a lot. And I really wanted to rest at that point. If I could have been like 10 hours total, even less, which future babies tend to, not always, but tend to be a little less time. I could have pushed through. So about 2 hours later, epidural comes.
It took them 2 hours to get you an epidural.
I would say it's about an hour and a half.
See, that's another thing too. Like you said, it'll take time, but when you're already maxed out and you're like, okay, I'm ready for relief, and then you still have to power through a little bit longer. Yep. That's a lot.
It is. And that's why I kind of wanted to, I wasn't totally maxed out yet, but I was getting there. Yeah. And I knew it could take time. And I just didn't want to enter that state of because of course, through a few, through the stages of labor, as you dilate, as it gets more intense, as contractions build and get stronger, the tears do come. I definitely melted down a couple times because of the pain. I don't want to say, I don't want to use the word pain because yes, it's painful, but it's so much more complex than that. It's so many things happening all at once. It was just, your body's just doing something that you're you have no control over. It's feral. And so a few times I was like, I don't know if I can do it. You just kind of, but then you kind of get back in, you just get back on the saddle and you just, always changing up what you're doing. If the water didn't work and I was getting overheated and I didn't like it, I would get out. And if I'm nope, I gotta get back in that water, and massage helps. All these things really do help you. But I do feel the very end is so intense that none of that, in my opinion. Yeah. So everything helps bring you to that point. But at the end, it's either you're doing it or you're not. It's just.
Yeah. I'm get away from me. Don't touch me.
Yes. No amount of in my opinion, massage or whatever. It's still just it's so intense that, it's intense, but it's amazing. It's incredible and amazing. I think it's an awesome experience. So the epidural comes, it doesn't take in my right leg. So I feel more so numb in my left and my, back. I was going through contractions, not really, I was sort of half feeling them. Getting it in was tricky because you have to, as you know, position yourself a certain way. And when you're already
and then try to stay still during a contraction. That's my favorite part.
Yeah, when you're already feral, you have to like wait for the contraction to pass. So that was kind of funny trying to like sort out like, okay, it's like I'd be like, it's coming down, and they could see it on their screen, like it's coming down. So they would
They didn't wait for me. They were like, it's go time. And I was like,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
It's
Watching the
weird.
horror, like Ryan usually has a good poker face. Ryan did not have a good poker face. And
No?
he doesn't want to watch a needle get jammed into his wife's back, I learned. And he was just sitting there like staring at me like, he was like just trying to be like, like
Right, like
I'm
just stay
staring like
still.
beady eyes, like laser, like focus, 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 focus. And he was trying to focus on me more for himself.
Oh my God. I know, it's like I remember Seth was like standing in front of me, and well, this was for the second go around for the epidural, but and I just like was like trying to stay still, but it was so hard. So I just had to like squeeze the shit out of his arms to like try to stay still so they could do what they need to do.
Mhm.
So it didn't really take on the right leg. And they of course asked me, how is it working? How do you feel? And I was like, well, I still feel them. And then of course I'm like, but it's okay. Because I almost expected to go all the way to the end. So I was prepared, which I think is so imperative. Prepare for what you're going to feel. I know it's hard to know what you're going to feel, but prepare for it to be a lot and very intense and physically uncomfortable.
And I want to tack onto that. And we touched on this a little bit last time in our conversation about this, but if you still think you're going to get an epidural, like if that's your plan all the way, I would highly encourage you to still plan, mentally prepare for a natural birth, because then at least you'll have the tools in your toolkit to get through those contractions until the point where you can get the epidural. Because my first go round, I was not ready for how much I was going to have to go through before I could even get the epidural. I thought it would hurt a little bit. I get to the hospital, they would set me up and I would be fine. No, I labored very, very hard before I ever got an epidural with her. And then with Everly, again, wanted to have an epidural, got to the hospital too late. I was not prepared for a natural birth either time. So I think what you're saying is so important. Even if you're like, nope, my birth plan is epidural, go through the steps to prepare yourself for a natural birth. So at least you've got the tools in your toolkit. And if it goes the way you plan and you get your epidural, perfect. You don't need
100%.
all the tools. But then if it doesn't, for whatever reason, you're
Yes.
okay and you're equipped. Yeah.
Like I couldn't agree more because it's so important. It doesn't even matter if, yeah, your plan is like, okay, get to 4 centimeters, get my epidural. Perfect. But it could fail. It could not take, they could need to redo it. There could be other things going on. You need to be prepared for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
reality that is like, hey, might not, we might not have time, or
Yeah.
hey, it's not working out and it'll be another 2 hours to get
Yeah.
there will be, I don't think that's talked about enough, is like,
Yeah.
there's things that happen before the epidural comes and even after. And then, um, even when it's time to push, like that's another interesting aspect. It was like, oh, okay, you just assumed once you say, okay, I'm ready for the epidural, you just assume till the end. That wasn't the case with me. And then I don't know what it's like with other people, but that was not the case with me. And so, yeah, first one didn't take, but of course I was prepared. So
Yeah.
me, I wasn't like, oh my God, oh my God. Whereas I could totally understand how that could totally send someone into a spiral, because it was getting to the point where it was like extra feral, like the
Yeah.
contractions were becoming like the labor dance, like the movements were like the rocking and like the uncontrollable
Oh yeah.
physical movements of just your body. Yeah, it was just it was becoming a lot. And so they were like, the nurses were great. They said, no, listen, we want to get you some rest, we're gonna do it again. I said, all right. I don't know how much longer that took. It could have been another hour, it could have been another 2 hours. I really don't know.
The time starts to like weirdly compress and also expand
Yeah.
in those moments. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, maybe it was another hour, who knows? But when they did finally come in and redo it, that was at the point where I was supremely feral. I was probably at 8, I was probably 8 pushing 9 centimeters, to be honest with you. For those listening who maybe don't know the end goal, I didn't know before I was pregnant, 10 centimeters is your end goal for when it's time. the canal is open, the birth canal, and you can push, it's time to push. But before you get there, that's not a thing. You have to dilate and you have to go through it. And that's when things get a little intense, because you're not ready to push, can't use all that energy for pushing yet. You just have to cope and you just have to deal until you get to 10. Anyways, they got me some really good relief. And I finally did feel the numbness in both legs. And but putting that second one in was really hard, because we'd wait till we would taper off from a contraction, because they were so intense and so close together that when I say so close together, they were still like a good 3 minutes, which is, we need them probably a bit more closer for like really getting contractions going. So it was like definitely building. And yeah, they finally were able to get it in. That was the time I was like squeezing Seth's like arms, because you can't move. You're trying not to move, but you're like writhing. It's really strange. Which is why it's ideal if you know you want an epidural. Like I still at that point, it was hard. I was vocal, because at that point I'm sure you know with Everly, it's like you're vocal. Like I was like low guttural noises helped.
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing. But I was never like desperate, which I'm thankful for. I was never like, I need this right now. I'm like, I can't do this. I was never like there, even though it was like really a lot. And I was like, whoa, I think I would like to like rest. So I was able to, they got me to a point where I would like have a contraction and not feel it, which I thought was like the funniest thing ever, because if you hadn't experienced contractions like intensely and you had gotten your epidural early, awesome. But if you do know what that super intensity feels like, as you do with Everly, you're like, wait, I'm having a contraction right now. I was just a feral animal 5 minutes ago. How is this possible?
And now I'm straight chilling. It's amazing.
And so I was like, oh my God, I get the relief that I needed. So I really love having a birth plan that's flexible. Like, yes, we all want to be as natural as possible, but it's okay to use the tools that we have.
Yes.
I was more than like, I still don't regret it to this day. Like, did I want to do a natural birth all the way? Absolutely. Or not natural, because of course birth vaginally is natural, but unmedicated. Yeah, I wanted to go unmedicated. I ended up using the nitrous oxide to take the edge off. And once that kind of, it's like the laughing gas that they have at some hospitals. And once that kind of didn't work for what I needed it to do, I used other methods. And then eventually we got to a good epidural stage. So they're like, we're going to leave you so you can take a nap. And I'm like, wow. I'm like thanking everyone. Like, thank you. You're so good at your job. Thank you. Right. They're all like giggling at me. So I take a nap for probably an hour, and I was like hoping to conk out for like 3 hours. I was like, perfect. Like I'd worked really hard. Seth was like dead on the recliner. He was like beyond done, because he hadn't slept at all either. About an hour later, they walk in and they're like, hey, so we're going to turn the epidural down. Well, first we're going to check you. And they're like, okay, you're at 10. We're going to turn the epidural down and we're going to give you Pitocin. And I'm like, oh, perfect. So I got like 1 hour relief in 21 hours, which is, it's fine, because I was prepared. I was prepared for that natural labor. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. But they're like, listen, your contractions aren't as close as we need them to be to really get things moving. It's like, fine, great. Do what you need to do. I'm ready. So they turned that epidural down so that I could like have some sensation. It still took a little edge off, but as you know, the sensation of when you're pushing, you still feel pretty much everything.
Pressure. Yeah. Well, but you need to feel it. You need to feel the pressure to understand what your body's doing and to tap into that. But I didn't realize that was a thing that I was going to have to do.
Exactly. I didn't know that either. I just because you kind of have to know when you have the epidural, you don't have that natural urge to push as much. So they want to taper it off. But that natural urge to push does come back, in fact. So I do feel like parts of it totally felt like what I had prepared for and was more like the unmedicated route because I still felt the urge to push. And that was with the help of Pitocin to kind of really rev everything up. So I ended up pushing for 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, a long
Mm-hmm.
time. And I tried, they were really good. I really wanted to try different positions, like all fours and side. They were really good, and they did allow me, even with the epidural, and they allowed me to do that. And then just throughout the whole experience from start to finish, once they hooked me up, even like hours before I got any like epidural relief at all, I was having, I guess, some high blood pressure. Seth was noticing, and they were mentioning. So yeah, so I was just kind of, the normal rigmarole of hooked up and things like that. They asked too if we wanted to like bring a mirror around, like if we wanted to see what was going on. And so I did. I said sure.
Oh my God, that was such a no for me. I was like,
Really?
absolutely not. Oh no. With Emerson, I was like, not a
Oh, I was like,
chance.
so whatever. And they were like, at a certain point, they're like, oh my God, we feel her like head. And that was like,
Do you
3
want
hours.
to touch her? And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I have waited for me. I literally always said,
I said yes.
I've waited 9+ months. I can wait 5 more minutes. I'll touch her when she fully arrives. Thank you.
Yeah, no. They're like, do you want to touch her? I was like, yeah. And of course, at first they're like, oh, she's totally bald. And we're like, oh, wow. And then they were like, never mind. She has a ton of hair.
Was that a she? Because she has so much hair. Like
Yeah,
what
I'm
did
like,
they
she's
think?
literally like has so much hair. So yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so it was really, we would do like all fours, which I assumed would be like the position I would prefer to birth in. Like maybe that would be the most with gravity and momentum. I'll be honest, I wasn't super productive in that position because your body is so physically exhausted after
Oh,
that point. It was like 19 hours in. You're just
yeah.
so exhausted. And my like muscles were giving out. Like it was like they were like shaking, because you're
Yeah.
trying to, and so you're trying to be productive and push, and it's not really being super productive to bring the baby down. And so we went back and side, and those seem to be way more productive. So it's just interesting because I always thought, oh no, the last thing I want to do is like birth on my back, and that but honestly, that was one of the most productive positions for me. So it's just interesting how I assumed one thing and then another thing happened, and it ended up being totally fine and what needed to happen. Because there's a lot of stigma, I think, around a lot of hospitalized births too. And they're like, well, birthing on your back is one of the worst things ever. And that ended up being what worked for me versus the other positions that I was able
Yeah.
to get most comfortable in.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting how that,
Yeah.
you
And
hear.
everyone's different and your bodies are different. We're
Yeah.
all, all got the same human form with the skeleton and everything else, but like everyone's hips are different and your positioning of your pelvis can be different and the width of your pelvis can be different, and just what works for one person may not work for the next, and whatever. Like you said, what matters is what's making your labor productive.
Exactly. And I think that was just like I had my birth plan, I had things I wanted to try. We tried almost, I would say like 90% of the things. And still, yeah, you want to focus on what's most productive, you
Yeah.
know? Well, at least I did, because I know some women would be like, no, 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 as long as it takes naturally. But I personally, when you're that exhausted, things change. And you are like, what's most productive? How can we all work together so that we get the baby safely out?
Right.
And and so that was what was working. So yeah, 3 hours later, and it just is watching the baby come out and seeing what your body does and how you open, if you catch my drift, is absolutely humbling and insane, because you think you'll never be the same, but everything does go back to normal. It's shocking, at least in my experience, but really just strange to, and also that like all the like medical staff comes in and you're just like, I mean, in my case, I was just like totally nude. You just don't care. You're like
Yeah.
a feral animal and you just don't care. And I'm sure that's not the case for if you start out with an epidural and you're able to ease into it. But when you when you get to the point where
Yes.
you're like closing into transition and you're close to that pushing stage, and you're just now getting some relief, you just don't really care anymore to who
Yeah.
sees you.
I laugh when you say that because like the girl I was in 2017 when I had Emerson, like 2022 Shannon had 2017 Shannon's nightmare birth. Like,
yeah, right.
you know what I mean? Like I rolled up too late and then I had to like strip my clothes off of me and like there was nothing modest about it at all. And to top it off, male doctor. Like this was my 2017 nightmare. And you know, when like you said, when you end up in the feral state because you don't end up with medication, yeah, you care a lot less about a lot of things for sure.
Just care. And they were at one point, they're like, do you want like your top things I had like or whatever? They're like, do you want that? And I was like, no, you just don't want anything. I'm like,
yeah,
no, just I don't want anything.
Y'all have seen boobs before. We're fine here.
I never put on the hospital gown either because I had this like thing. I had this like button thing I wore, but to be honest with you, I was like nude most of the time because it was like in and out of the tub and clothes don't even exist.
Yeah. Clothes don't know them.
we get to that point, and it's amazing because like you think there's the baby so close to coming out because you can see them like crowning, but then it still took like another hour to get her out once she like crowned.
Ma'am.
So she was born and it was like, as you know, it's like the most like emotional, incredible, Seth and I are just like looking at each other, sobbing. You just can't believe that like this baby that's yours is like there.
I'm just going to interject really quickly because if you don't have that experience, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have the beautiful sobbing. Like, no. I love that for you.
I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Like that's doesn't have to be what happens.
Yeah. And it's all okay.
Yes. Yeah. It's all okay.
Yeah.
And so, but don't worry. Here's where it gets interesting. So we have that beautiful moment and then, and she's like, they hand her to me and then they're
doing their own thing between your legs. Everyone in the world is staring at your vagina and you're just like holding your baby with your feet up in the stirrups or whatever, just chilling. Sorry if I moved. If you couldn't hear me, I was way back in my chair with my legs up in the air.
She's showing us what it looks like. A demonstration. Yeah. And so I like got this like huge flood of like probably endorphins. I don't know. I just felt like almost like light on my feet and just like this huge rush of everything. And I thought, wow, I'm just, experiencing it's like a runner's high or something like that. Well, it turns out it was all the blood leaving my body that was like making me, I was like, wow. And then, cause they were working down there, but it was happening quick. So they were about to like tell me what was going on. But, so she was like, hey, you had an internal tear. And she was working really hard stitching. So thank God at that point, I did have the epidural relief kicked in still because, I didn't have to feel it. Thank God. I didn't have to feel the stitching.
I don't think I knew like an internal tear as in where were you bleeding from?
So it was like, it's hard. I don't really know exactly. They said internal tear. I think it was like 2nd degree. I feel like I have the term.
Okay. So that wasn't why you were losing blood. You had a tear. It was. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
Okay.
But it's different from, so like a bad blood loss, like really dangerous one is if you're bleeding from your like a uterine hemorrhage. So I was what they called like a hemorrhage from like I was hemorrhaging from an internal tear, but it wasn't a uterine hemorrhage, which is super dangerous, which is what women like well back, now they can quickly work with it, but like back in 50s, 60s, that was something women were still dying from in childbirth. Yeah. So it wasn't that, thankfully. They were working hard and I was feeling little little tugs. But then I just didn't realize how much blood I was really losing. So I kind of look around and I'm like, very calmly, I was like, hey, everyone, I think I'm going to pass out. I
There, remember me? Lady who just pushed the baby out.
remember being like, hey, and I just like try to lock eyes with someone because they're all so busy working on the tear. And I'm like, hey, and so I never pass out, but after I say that and one person is like, oh, okay, good. Then they look at my vitals and I'm like, and everyone kind of notices at the same time. And Seth looks at me and apparently I'm like white as a sheet. And then I just kind of like retreat. I close my eyes, I kind of retreat because I know what I need to do to not pass out. You know, you start seeing the black, your ears start ringing, all the sounds. Some people have never experienced that. Because I was talking to someone about this and they were like, I've actually never experienced what it feels like to almost pass out. And I was like, that's very interesting.
It's very weird. Yeah. I think you described it well. Yeah.
But all black. Yeah. You start seeing like black blotches and
for me, it's like it starts to narrow, it's like someone's closing the curtains on my vision.
The curtains start closing. Yes. So I kind of retreat and I do my best to like, at this point, I'm like, okay, Seth, it's time for you to take the baby. Like, I don't want to pass out. And so, yeah, so they right away, like they come on in and they take a look at my vitals and everything's kind of crashing. So they get in, while the doctor's still working on like stitching, they get in someone else to start working on my, like getting me stable. So they have 2 access, points hooked up. So they have one that epidural's in and then they have one that is just there ready for whatever they need. So thankfully they did do that because I think they gave me 2 boluses of fluids, but they just start me on fluids right away. And then they, made sure I was stable. And they said, okay, if you start to feel like you're going back and you're going to crash again, let us know. We'll give you some other, we'll work out some other things. And so I was like, oh, I'm sure I'll be fine, whatever. And then like a mere 5 minutes later, I do it again. I go, hey, everyone. I just like make sure I lock eyes with, because there's like, at this point, there's like 15 people in there. And then when I really start crashing again is in like, there's like all, there's so many people in there. You're totally like nude. You're totally like whatever. You just don't even care because you're like, you just need them to do what they need to do. So anyways, they come back in and they just keep checking, how you doing? I'm like, yep, I didn't pass out yet, but I'm, but I think I might, whatever. They give me like a protein plasma thing for my blood to kind of get me back and stable. But it never really felt totally like all there, like even a few hours after we were getting ready to move to our postpartum unit. But I couldn't at that point sitting up. My sister had come and my parents had come. And at that point, sitting up, I couldn't even do it yet. Like I would sit up and I'd be like, I'm going to pass out. So I have to lay back down. And I definitely almost passed out again. So I got out of the shower. I like put my clothes on. I'm like, actually, no, I just in a towel. I was like, I'm going to lay here for a minute. And she was like, okay. And then I like put clothes on and whatever. So 3 a.m. went to bed. She helped with the baby and like took her for a few hours. It was really helpful. Oh, then the next day they come do the testing on the blood and I've lost way too much blood. So my hemoglobin levels were really low. I think they said it was like a 6 and you're supposed to have like a 9. And so they said, look, I think we should do a blood transfusion.
And for those who don't know, you can die if it gets too low. My mother just went through this. She lost a lot of blood with, she was low to begin with, and then she had a hip replacement and she dipped even lower. And she was like, I don't feel good. After she got released, went to her primary care doctor. And he was like, we're sending you to the ER right now for a transfusion. And after she's like, I think I was going to die if I did not. Yeah. So you can. So for those listening, yeah, if that number gets too low, it's really, really dangerous.
Yeah. And my color was, I was like yellow. I looked like jaundiced. My color was not good for like a good week after that. So they did the blood transfusion and it was super weird because it literally took all day. It took like 8 hours and it felt cold going in your body. And it made me like have this insane urge to like pee, and you're already like, basically can't control anything down there yet either. So it was, I would have to like bring, the nurse called it my dancing partner. I'd have to like bring the like blood into the bathroom with me so I could like pee, and it was, and like you change your diaper while you're in there. It's very humbling.
So glamorous, the whole experience.
Experience is so insanely humbling. Yeah, thankfully I got that because it definitely helped perk me up right away. And but I was in really good spirits the entire time. I really was, even though it was technically, I would say, traumatic, because like, you know, I did hemorrhage, but it wasn't in the way that was so extremely dangerous. And I'm thankful that everyone was there like immediately. And I'm just thankful because I don't know how this would have gone. Like I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't have wanted to been in an ambulance, you know, crashing like that, trying to get me to the hospital. Let's say I was, you know, no judgment,
trying to, if you were home birthing,
but that is the reality. Like that
Yeah.
could have happened, and it could have been actually traumatic at that point for me. Yeah, it was an awesome experience, and it just builds a lot of self-awareness on what you can handle, because we really can handle a lot more than we imagine we can.
And we are going to pause this conversation right here. We'll be back next week with part 2 of Mary's journey. If you are pregnant and looking at a delivery in the future, you know, take what resonates from her story and leave the rest behind. But I do encourage you to take the opportunity to find and receive as much education as possible. I would highly recommend taking a birthing course, or even if it's online, or seeking support of a midwife or a doula leading up to your delivery. But at the end of the day, everyone's experience is their own. You do what feels most aligned for you. Until next time, come hang out with me over on socials at Having a Mom Moment, both on Instagram and on Facebook. If there's a topic you would like to talk about or hear about on a future episode, send me a message, let me know. We would love to address the concerns and the interests of this audience. And when I say we, I mean me, because it's a party of one. If you're loving the podcast, be sure to subscribe, share it with people who you think would also enjoy what's happening over here. And if you really, really love it, a 5-star review would mean so much. In case someone has told you today, you are amazing, you are loved, and I am so proud of the beautiful human